The unveiling of the company of heaven. Every man and every woman is a star.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Free Radical Media Podcast. I am Eric Scott Picard, joined as ever by Patrick Ryan. So tonight we've got an excellent show. It's the return of our friend David J. Brown. This show's been in the works for quite a while. Let me read off biography here. David J. Brown is an American writer, interviewer, and consciousness researcher, and has studied parapsychology and the effects of entheogenic substances. He holds a master's degree in psychobiology from New York University and has worked as a neuroscience researcher in learning and memory at the University of Southern California. He's periodically the guest editor of the MAPS, that's Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, Bulletin. His work has appeared in numerous magazines, including Scientific American, Discover, and Wired, and he is the author of numerous books, most notably 4 best-selling volumes of interviews with leading-edge thinkers, Mavericks of the Mind, Voices from the Edge, Conversations on the Edge of the Apocalypse, and Mavericks of Medicine. Those are excellent books, by the way. His newest book is Dreaming Wide Awake, Lucid Dreaming, Shamanic Healing, and Psychedelics. We've really been looking forward to having you on the show, David, especially to talk about this new book. Welcome back.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. We interviewed you about 2 years ago, and I remember you even then talking about how you were doing the preliminary research for this. So dreaming is something that I've especially within the last year, something that I've really gotten into. It's really piqued my interest, and it seems like it's sort of it doesn't seem like it's gotten as much research as it really deserves. And everyone experiences dreams. It's something that's universal, and despite all that, at least within the whole, psychedelic alternative philosophy type scene, it doesn't seem like it's really gotten as much notoriety. I mean, at least from my limited perspective. Would you agree with that, David?
I think there's actually been quite a bit of research on dreaming over the past 50 years or so, and in the past 10 or 20 years, there's been a resurgence of interest in research into lucid dreaming, which is basically the subject of my book. I think if you look a little more, if you actually do a little more research into the studies that have been, there's been many hundreds of studies done into understanding the neurophysiology of dreaming, dream content, the differences between the sexes and what they dream about, the relationship between dreaming and illness, and there's been now quite a bit of research done into lucid dreaming, which is, for those of you for your listeners who aren't aware, lucid dreaming is, of course, the process by which you become awake and aware during a dream while it's actually happening, and have the ability then to interact with the dream without any physical or social consequences.
That's so fascinating, because I remember listening to a Terence McKenna lecture. I forget which one it was, but I remember him specifically saying, it was one of his later lectures before he passed away, and I remember him specifically saying that his next area of research was going to be studying dreams and really, sort of getting deep into it, as he did with ayahuasca and psychedelics. And I find it so interesting that here's something that is basically a psychedelic-like state that we enter into every night, and it just goes by unnoticed, especially within with the majority of people in Western civilization. Whereas if you look at a lot of indigenous traditions, dreams were sort of like the backbone of society, from what I
Yeah.
understand. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Well, you see, our culture tends to be very dismissive of dreams. Almost everybody, when they're a child and they wake up from a nightmare or some kind of powerful dream, what's the first thing your parents say to you, honey? Oh, honey, that was just a dream, to try to dismiss the power of it or the reality of it. So we're kind of conditioned from a very young age, usually, to not really pay much attention to dreams, to think that they're just mild hallucinations, that they don't have much to do with reality. And there are some cultures, as you mentioned, that tend to give great value to dreaming, to dream interpretation. And interestingly, every culture in the world has at least some portion of the population that pays a lot of attention and gives a lot of significance to dreams, both dreams as being able to prophesize future events, being able to understand yourself better, being able to get insights into who you are. There's actually quite a large community and a growing community of people interested in dream work and intentional dreaming and lucid dreaming. So the community is really growing, but the predominant culture and the predominant agenda in this culture is that dreams are something that are not given much value and they're not given much attention, and as a result, people tend to forget them more and more. Dreams become more memorable when you start paying attention to them, if you start writing them down, if you start talking about them in the morning, if you actually share them with other people, you start to remember your dreams more and more. So the more attention you pay to dreaming, the more you'll remember and the more you'll actually get out of it. And unfortunately, we have a culture that hasn't really been giving a lot of attention to dreaming, but that seems to be changing. There's been, especially in the past 20 years, there's been a huge resurgence and interest in not only dreaming, but especially lucid dreaming. There's been, I think, around 20 Hollywood films, who are about that subject. It's been appears in many science fiction stories and television, TV shows. Now there's been a whole slew of books, written on the subject. So, and most interestingly, they're now developing a technology that may allow us to actually lucid dream on command. And that's, I think, the most exciting thing going on with lucid dreaming right now. It's been very elusive and difficult for people to lucid dream. I'd be happy to talk about some techniques during this conversation about how people can lucid dream. But it's, for most people, it's something that occurs, spontaneously, maybe once or twice in their life, and usually that's it. So there's now a kind of cultivation going on and a kind of more attention being paid to it, and I think it's wonderful. It's kind of a continuation of our whole interest in expanding consciousness and gaining greater awareness, as a species.
Sure. It's I'm sort of curious. I know like Freud and Jung did a lot of research on dreams. What's the current state of dream research today?
Well, it's gotten a lot more physiologically based. When Freud and Jung were doing their original dream interpretation studies and developing different theories, they were basically working with psychiatric clients that they had and developing theories from their own particular work. What's been gone on since has been we've been able to develop MRI techniques, PET scans, different brain imaging, and we can actually now look, get a window into what's going on into the dreaming brain while it's actually happening. And this is really exciting research. It was part of the inspiration from my book that we learned that there are a lot of similarities in particular brain states, what's going on in the brain when someone is, say, tripping on psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms, and what's happening when we're dreaming. There's a lot of particular brain centers that light up specifically and are very, very similar. So it almost seems like psychedelics are in some sense allowing more of the dream world into our waking consciousness. And by lucid dreaming, what we're doing is we're bringing more of our waking consciousness into the dream world. And it seems like that may be our sort of our agenda as a species, that may be what we're sort of designed to do, is to sort of build bridges between these different worlds, through shamanism, through lucid dreaming, through the development of these new technologies that will allow us to lucid dream on command. We may be able to set up communication systems. We may be able to set up transportation systems. There may be whole new worlds that will open up as a result of this. But I'm just thrilled and excited about the new research that's going on. One of the things that I'm most excited about is there's at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, they recently discovered a technique for allowing people to lucid dream on command. We know that lucid dreaming occurs in the brain when an area of the left hemisphere, the front of the left hemisphere of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, when that area becomes activated during sleep and during dreaming, a person is very likely to have a lucid dream. Now that we know from recording people who were lucid dreaming and able to signal from the lucid dream state to signal if they were dreaming, and we were able to record that going on in their brains. Now, what's really fascinating is that we've learned how to actually, through something called transcranial stimulation, we've learned how to stimulate the prefrontal cortex when people are dreaming, so that they'll have lucid dreams almost every time. We can do it on command. And there's now a startup company with a Kickstarter program right now who's actually building, trying to miniaturize these devices and make them available to everyone, so that we'll very soon all be able to lucid dream as easily as turning on your TV or your computer. And what that means in terms of our developments of the imagination, our developments in terms of communication. I mean, maybe we can have shared lucid dreams with one another. That's a whole area I explore in my book, the whole notion of shared dreaming. There's a long history of people who claim that they can share not only the content of dreams and not only similar dream content, but sometimes actually meet in lucid dreams together and both be fully conscious. I've experienced it with my wife, so I know it's possible, and it's very, very interesting where all this is going to be heading soon.
That is so fascinating, and it makes me sort of wonder, and this question seems to be, I've gotten a lot of different answers on this, but I'm curious about your take on it. Is the dream realm, is it one and the same as what a lot of occultists would call the astral realm?
That's such a great question, and that's something I explore in great depth in my book. Whether or not what occultists call the astral plane, what we call lucid dreaming, what we call out-of-body experiences, and what we call hyperspace, and a DMT experience or a very, very powerful psychedelic or ayahuasca experience, there's unquestionably a great deal of overlap in terms of people's descriptions of these different realms. Whether they are all the same is a very interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I think that there's different frequencies of consciousness and different planes maybe of existence that share common characteristics. Like, for example, there's a strong correlation between out-of-body experiences and lucid dreaming. In other words, people who tend to have out-of-body experiences also tend to have lucid dreams. And it's not uncommon for, say, someone to have an out-of-body experience where they're, in a relaxed state, lying in bed, and they start to get kind of, extremely relaxed, their body gets kind of paralyzed, and they feel that they could then literally, move their spirit or a kind of ghostly aspect of themselves out of their body and then into the room outside their body and look around. And that's a traditional out-of-body experience. Now, the thing about that, though, is that oftentimes when people enter the astral version of their bedroom or wherever their body is lying, there's a slight difference between the material version of the room and what they're actually perceiving when they're out of their body. In other words, when you have an out-of-body experience, it's not unusual for the room to have like an extra window or an extra door, or for the furniture to be moved in a slightly different way. So it's not the identical room. And skeptics say that this is because you're not really having an out-of-body experience. What you're doing is creating a model of an out-of-body experience in your mind. And some of the evidence to support that idea is that oftentimes an out-of-body experience will then transform into a lucid dream. It starts out in your bedroom, leaving your body, but you go out of your door, and the next thing you know, you're actually in another country, and you start, meeting characters from your past, and it becomes much more dreamlike. There's a wonderful book just called Out of Body Experiences by Oliver Fox that was written in the 1920s, where he basically equates lucid dreaming and the astral plane. I think it's an interesting comparison. I explore it in my book, and I don't really have an answer for you other than it's something that's really wonderful to speculate about.
That is so fascinating. That it reminds me of a quote that I remember hearing from Ramana Maharshi that went somewhere along the lines of understanding the sleep cycle allows one to understand life itself. And I really do sort of think there's a gaining insight into the sleep wake cycle is sort of like a microcosm of perhaps the death rebirth cycle.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there's definitely a lot of insight that's gained from not only, as you say, looking at the sleep cycle and relating that whole process to the life cycle in general, but that there's just so much insight to be gained, from studying our dreams. But yeah, it's an interesting process.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it reminds me of the Tibetan Buddhist work with dreams and their dream yogas, and looking at the dream as the ambiguity of the dream state is basically, really, when it comes down to it, very similar, if not identical, to sort of life itself. And
Exactly, and that is really one of the main reasons why lucid dreaming has been incorporated into Tibetan Buddhism as part of its practice, because it helps people to realize that not only is reality created by your mind in a dream, but reality is also being created by your mind right now. So it's being able to the understanding that reality is basically exists inside your mind and not vice versa, is an understanding that comes from lucid dreaming and then applies to our understanding of reality in general. And that's really the thrust of Tibetan Buddhism, and it's been utilizing lucid dreaming as a path towards greater spiritual awareness for a couple thousand years now.
Right, and it's funny too, because it's from what I know, at least, it seems a lot of the major religions, the major world religions, they didn't really acknowledge and utilize the dream state as much as the indigenous style religions, except for, of course, Tibetan Buddhism. But as far as I know, Tibetan Buddhism got their sort of dream techniques from the Bon tradition that sort of preceded it. So
exactly,
it's just funny to me that there's just there's this difference between the respect of the dream state between the mainstream sort of religions, even the mainstream yogas, from what I know, and the indigenous.
Oh yeah, it's really fascinating, the contrast. If you look at the Hebrew and Christian Bible, the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament, actually has, I don't know, many references to a dream prophecy. There's a number of times where they talk about dreams being used as a prophecy. But later on, it gets associated with witchcraft, and it gets associated with sin, and it's something that you're not supposed to do. Dream interpretation later became denounced by the Catholic Church. So there was a deliberate suppression of people trying to attempt to stop people from looking more deeply into their dreams. And I think for the same reason that psychedelic states of consciousness have been suppressed. I think that people gaining access into their unconscious, gaining access into broader scopes of reality, this threatens a lot of the conventional belief systems, and it threatens people in power. So I think there's been a deliberate attempt to suppress the interest and the activities associated with developing better techniques for exploring dreaming.
Well, I was just thinking then that if this process of lucid dreaming is so key to early indigenous societies, it seems, as you've said, it can be something that can be trained and learned in order to achieve this state. It seems that it could also be something that can be suppressed, through cultural manipulation. And it seems like our society's it seems like we've de-emphasized that aspect of the individual and the self, right, collectively.
Yeah.
what is it like? What is it about this portion of the brain that becomes activated during lucid dreaming? Like, do you think that individuals in previous times, previous eras, do you think it activated more in them? Does it activate less in the modern human being because of cultural conditioning? Like, what is the difference here?
I think the cultural conditioning definitely plays a role, where people are much more focused on external events now because of mass media, electronic communications. I think people are less internally focused than they have been in the past. So I think that plays a role. But I think that another aspect that's often been overlooked is the influence of electric lighting. Most people don't realize how much that has changed human sleep patterns. Before electric lighting, human beings basically slept in two different periods. They basically slept, they would usually go to bed around the time when it got dark, and would usually sleep for 3 or 4 hours. And then around midnight to around 2 in the morning, it was very common for people to get up for around 2 hours and just talk or walk around or read or meditate. People were in kind of a different altered state of consciousness during that period. And it seems that being awake and then going back to sleep is one of the techniques for promoting lucid dreaming. So it may be that people were lucid dreaming naturally more in their natural states when they were having these two different sleep periods that electric lighting seemed to end. There's a lot of references. If you look at a lot of old books that were written, they talk about first sleep and second sleep. And most people don't even realize that this has happened. So I think that's one of the things that's probably influenced our brains and one of the reasons why we may have less lucid dreams. When I spoke with the DMT researcher Rick Strausman, he told me that electric lighting also tends to reduce natural DMT levels in the brain. DMT being a neurotransmitter that, as I'm sure you know, has very psychedelic properties when it's used in ways that are vaporized or put into the body or as part of ayahuasca. And our DMT levels naturally are lower now because we're exposed to electric lighting. So there may be a relationship between having electric lighting and changing our sleep patterns that's in some ways decreased the amount of lucid dreaming. And that may be one of the influences besides the cultural dismissiveness of dreams in general. Oh, honey, that was just a dream. So there's been sort of this attempt to try to reduce consciousness, to try to keep people boxed into a certain way of thinking in general. So dreaming is just sort of the natural psychedelic way that everyone develops creative ideas and new ways of looking at things, and so it's something that could really threaten people in power who are wanting people to look at everything in a certain way that maximizes their profits.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It seems like it comes part and partisan with the kind of materialist worldview. It's just a dream. You marginalize that realm of having any value simply because it doesn't exist in the physical.
Exactly, and not every culture does that. I mean, there are a lot of cultures that view dream experiences as real experiences. Somebody may say, I spent time with my grandfather last night. And people talk about, even though their grandfather died 5 years ago, but people understand that, or they assume, or they communicate in such a way where they take dreams, or dream experiences, or experiences in altered states of consciousness to not be imaginary, but rather to be just happening on a different plane of awareness or a different plane of reality.
Yeah, and I can only really speak for myself, but when it comes to parlor psychics and whatnot, I'm fairly skeptical. I take them with a pinch of salt. But with that said, I've had some profoundly prophetic dreams that obviously I can't prove to anybody. But in my own life, I've had dreams that were clearly precognizant of future events. And I mean, I've heard it multiple, from multiple people many different times. But it definitely seems that, utilizing and grasping the dream state allows one to really, is a surefire way of really accessing latent psychic abilities and whatnot.
Oh, absolutely. I have a whole chapter in my book about that. Stanley Krippner, psychologist, back in the 60s, did some dream telepathy research that is absolutely astonishing. Really, you should just look this up on the internet, or there's been a whole book written on the subject. It is amazing research, truly amazing. What he did was he had a sleep laboratory in New York City at the time, and he would have people sleep in a completely soundproof room, lightproof room, cut off from all sensory stimuli, right? And while these people were sleeping, at a designated time during the night, someone who they would call a telepathic sender would pick one of 4 different paintings randomly. There was an envelope that they would choose randomly, and it would have one of 4 different paintings. And the person was then supposed to look at the painting and try to send a telepathic image of that into the person who was dreaming's mind. Okay? Now, then what they would do was after 10 minutes of the person trying to do this, if the person was in REM sleep at the time, what they would do, REM sleep, by the way, is rapid eye movement, and that's when people are most likely to be dreaming. They would then wake the subjects up and then ask them to record their dreams in some manner. Now, what they then did was collect all of the dream records with all of the different paintings, and then asked an independent set of judges to choose which dreams they thought went with which paintings. Now, remember, for each one there was 4 paintings, so they would only have a 25% chance of getting that right by chance, and the results were much better with chance. I don't remember the exact results, but I mean, the order of magnitude was like billions to one that it could have happened by chance. So there was very, very, very clear evidence that there was some type of communication going on, some type of ability that the people who were sending these images to the dreamers, it was getting incorporated into their dream in some way that independent judges were able to match the dreams with the paintings. Now that's remarkable. That's remarkable because we have nothing in science that would explain that otherwise than something like telepathy or some unexplained power of the mind. So that's really strong scientific evidence for the notion that people can share information through their minds in ways that conventional science simply doesn't understand.
That's unbelievable. And it's to me, it's like as if these dreams or the dream realm in general is like almost the antithesis to this sort of materialistic paradigm we're in. And, it would make sense that this paradigm sort of consciously or subconsciously wants to, repress our dreaming understanding and repress the intellectual curiosity of dreams in and of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just that I'm really gonna have to do some research on that because that's just really some mind-blowing.
Yeah, and into the psychic phenomena associated with dreams, and also look into shared dreaming. That's really the other mind-blowing thing. There's a whole book written on, particularly on that subject. There's amazing anecdotes, people sharing dream content, people sharing very similar experiences in their dreams, and actually people meeting up in lucid dreams. Sometimes one person will be lucid and the other person won't, and sometimes they'll both be lucid. And, really, it is absolutely remarkable, the stories that people have reported. And me and my wife, we were experimenting for a year trying to do this. And we kept having, dreams that were like where we had shared content, and then a few times we had dreams where one of us would become lucid and try to find the other one in the dream. And in those cases, the other person would usually, when you were encounter the person you're looking for in a lucid dream, who you previously wanted to have a shared dream with, if they don't become lucid, it seems that they are like a mechanical dummy in the dream. They just act like a puppet. They just sort of respond like in a very unconscious way. But in those rare occasions when you can wake them up and you can talk as rationally and cognitively and aware as you are right now, it is absolutely mind-blowing. And it did finally happen to us. It wasn't that long ago. It was around 2 months ago. I had a lucid dream. I went looking for my wife in the dream, and I suddenly found myself in our bedroom, and she was sleeping. And so I shook her awake, and I said, Molly, we're having a lucid dream right now. And she looks at me and groggily, and she goes, "No, we're not." And I said, "No, check to see." And there's a way, one of the techniques for lucid dreaming is to get into the habit of regularly checking your reality to see which reality you're in. You can do this by trying to breathe through your nostrils when you're pinching your nose closed. If you try to do it right now, you won't be able to do it. But in a lucid dream, you can do it easily, and that's one of the signals and one of the ways you learn to lucid dream. So I said this to Molly. I said, "Hey, just try breathing through your nose right now, and you'll see what I mean." And so she did it. She goes, "Oh my God, you're right. Oh my God, I'm dreaming right now." And so I woke up, and a few minutes later, my wife woke up, and I said, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened." And she said to me, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened." And her experience that she told me was that she said that she was having a lucid dream, and I can't remember what she was doing in the lucid dream, but she was doing something, and she then had what was called a false awakening. In other words, in the lucid dream, she thought she woke up into real reality, but actually she was actually still dreaming. She thought she had woken up, and there I was in the dream, and I was saying to her, Molly, you're having a lucid dream right now." And she thought that she had really woken up. And she had a memory of me telling her, no, check, try breathing through your nostrils right now, and realized that, and she did, and realized she was dreaming, and then she woke up a few minutes later. So it was that was the closest we've ever come. I mean, if that happened by chance or was just a coincidence, it was truly remarkable coincidence, because I really don't think so. But I won't say for sure that it was a shared lucid dream experience, but it certainly seems like a subject worth investigating and worth researching.
Yeah, I'd say that is pretty remarkable. I mean,
That's incredible. Yeah. Yeah, my wife and I have sometimes we've compared notes in the morning, and we've had dreams that have overwhelmingly similar themes,
Yeah.
but never quite to that extent.
Yeah, well, actually, maybe try to, and I have the intention of doing it. Make a commitment to one another and say, if you become lucid in a dream, try to find me, and if I become lucid, I'll try to find you, or try to meet. Say that you're going to meet in a particular spot that you actually both know from waking reality. There's been a lot of informal experiments, groups that people form in different forums on the internet, and there's been a lot of people experimenting with this. On an informal level, there's been no real scientific research done on it, but a lot of people are getting really interesting results. So you can sort of make formal experiments out of this. It took me and my partner almost a year before we had that very brief experience that I just described. But I would be most curious to hear about your results or anyone's results from this. I think a whole other book can be written just particularly about that. There's a great book by Robert Wagner called Lucid Dreaming, and he's really the first person who I learned about doing this from. He has a chapter in his book where he has the results from experiments that he partook in, and some of his colleagues as well, and they had experiences that were much more remarkable than the one I just described with my wife. I mean, really, they lasted much longer and much more detail, and And with these transcranial brain stimulators that I was describing earlier, when we'll be able to lucid dream on command, that's when we'll really be able to test the shared dreaming and really to see if we can. I mean, we know from Stanley Krippner's research that there's dream telepathy. We know that people can actually exchange information. So it seems that there's really a high possibility that we can actually share some type of dream environment, and whether that's happening on the astral plane or some other level of reality that we just haven't been able to determine yet, or may be able to reach through DMT or other different ways. But whatever it is, I think that, like I said, it really should be given serious consideration, and scientific research in this area would just be, I think, absolutely mind-blowing and produce results that not only would be truly fascinating, but can have practical applications in terms of helping people to heal from traumas and heal from injuries. There's evidence that shows that lucid dreaming, like psychedelic therapy, can be useful for medical treatments of different traumas and injuries and things. So there's really great things that can come out of this. So that's why I really think that we really should be putting more resources into researching this.
David, what are your thoughts on the dream realm or the astral or even consciousness itself as being some sort of information network, right? So there's very old texts and meditation techniques whereby, for example, someone would put themselves in a meditative state or into a lucid dream, it seems like, from some of these texts, and they envision, like, say, a library. They're looking for a certain piece of information. They go to and they find a book, open it, and it has that information there. And once they, come back from that state, they have that information. That information is actually available in the material world for them, right? So they're able to connect with this field and just kind of pluck information that is existent in the physical world, basically out of, I have no better word, the ether. What do you think about that as a model?
Yeah, that is, I think, the most interesting aspect of lucid dreaming, what you're describing, and that's, I sort of lead up to that in my book, and that's what it culminates in discussing, exactly that. There definitely seems like, as we mentioned, like there's some type of psychic abilities that are enhanced during lucid dreaming, and you definitely seem to be able to pick up information. But the most incredible thing that you can do in a lucid dream is, it's after you've tried flying and after you've had sex with your ideal lover and after you've, swam underwater in outer space and all that, and had interesting conversations with all the dream characters and sort of explored all that, you get to the point where you realize the most exciting thing you can do in a lucid dream is ignore everything going on in the characters, the people, all the environment, and just lift your eyes up to the sky and talk to the dream itself. You can ask the dream questions. When I say the dream, do I mean the unconscious, or it's very similar to like an experience on ayahuasca when you can speak or dialogue with the plant spirit or the entity or the part of your brain that you're normally not in touch with, or whatever model you use for this higher intelligence that seems to know us better than we know ourselves and seems to have access to all this wide amount of information about the world, whether it's through DNA or some type of atomic akashic record or something that spreads through the universe. We can speculate, all night long about where all that information is stored and how it's all so interconnected and how we can access it. But regardless of where it comes from, the most amazing thing is anyone can learn to access it by speaking to the dream. If you just, like I said, raise your eyes to the sky and talk to the dream. Ask the dream what you want to know. Show me what you think I need to know. Show me what happened to me when I was younger that I forgot that's influencing my life. Show me how to make my life better. Or more specifically, I know someone who said, show me where this freckle is on somebody's body so I can prove to them that I have a psychic ability to find it, and they were correct. There is this ability to be able to communicate directly with the spirit of the dream, with the orchestrator of the dream, with your unconscious, with some type of higher intelligence. I don't know what it is, but that to me is really the thread that runs through my entire book, that weaves together what psychedelic experiences and what dreams and lucid dreams have in common, is this ability to communicate with some type of higher intelligence. Some call it God, some call it angels, extraterrestrials. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's just some, the other half of your own brain. But there is definitely a intelligence that you can access through lucid dreaming, through high states of psychedelic awareness, that seems to know more about us than we know ourselves, and has access to, it seems, all the information in the universe, like the Akashic records or something like that. So those are my thoughts on that very, very, very interesting subject.
Yeah, that's something I would, when I get my lucid dreaming skills down, I would definitely like to try that one, because that raises a lot of philosophical questions for me that I don't really want to get too much deeper into, because I feel like I could talk all day about it. But it's sort of reminiscent of Terence McKenna's old idea that that history itself is more of a dream than the dream realm. That it's like at some point with, virtual reality or whatever, maybe some far off technology, that will sort of wake up out of this illusion of material separate reality and wake up to this revelation that it's all mind. It's all an emanation of mind. It's all an emanation of the imagination. It always has been, and it always will be. And what we're in now is actually the quote-unquote dream.
Yeah. I think that the parallels are very interesting. And isn't it interesting that we use the word awaken to describe someone who becomes more spiritually aware? The same word that we use to describe someone who transforms from the dream state to the waking state. We say awaken. So I think there's definitely a parallel between the process of going from dreaming to lucid dreaming, or dreaming to waking, and the process of having, say, mystical experiences in this reality and becoming more awake and aware. There's a lot of spiritual or mystical traditions or occult traditions that claim that most human beings are basically asleep, that they're just sleepwalking through life, and that when they have their first psychedelic or mystical experience, it awakens them to higher states of consciousness, to the fact that they have an existence that goes beyond their physical body, that they have a connection to a great past. I mean, that's what happens in a lucid dream. You realize that for a fact, that you have an existence not only in the dream state, but also in the material world. You have at least two lives, and that's very similar to, say, somebody having a mystical experience and remembering past lives, or, getting genetic memories, or seeing that they're part of a continuum of life, that they're, when they define their sense of I and distinguish themselves from others, is not as clearly defined as we often think before having these experiences. So I think there's great parallels between understanding the process of awakening from a dream, and awakening in a dream, and awakening from the sleeping level of just plodding through material reality, and becoming aware of the greater continuity and interconnection between all life. So, and that's why it's been incorporated into mystical traditions, lucid dreaming, and in Tibetan Buddhism for so long, because it leads to exactly those types of revelations.
So for someone listening right now that wants to start delving into lucid dreaming, what would you recommend would be their first step?
That's such a great question. I'll bet that a good percentage of your listeners tonight, just by listening to this conversation, just by hearing us talking about lucid dreaming, are going to have a lucid dream tonight. Just the process of talking about it, thinking about it, reading about it, that's one of the things that many people say they have lucid dreams very soon after that. Some of the other techniques, meditation helps people to have lucid dreams more. It's important to get into the habit of first of all, writing down your dreams when you wake up, to pay more attention to your dreams. When you wake up in the morning, immediately start writing down what you remember. Even if you don't remember anything, write down how you feel, and give yourself a few minutes every morning to think about and reflect upon your dreams. And then, what would be really the next step is get into the habit of asking yourself the all-important question: am I dreaming right now? Now, that's the question you have to get into the habit of asking yourself. You're dreaming around 1/10 of the day. So if you get into the habit of asking yourself, am I dreaming right now? You'll be right around 1/10 of the time. And the thing to do is to not just say, of course I'm not dreaming right now, because that's what most people are inclined to do when they ask themselves, am I dreaming? Well, of course I'm not dreaming. And if you do that, what'll happen is you'll follow that same pattern to the dream. You'll say in a dream, am I dreaming right now? And you'll say, of course I'm not dreaming right now, because the world around you will look every bit as real as the world does when you're awake. What you have to do is you have to answer the question sincerely. You have to really think about it, and you have to actually test your reality. I mentioned before earlier that when I had that shared lucid dream seemingly with my wife, that one of the tests we used was to pinch your nostrils closed and try breathing out of your nose. And you obviously won't be able to do it in this reality, but you'll be able to do it easily in a lucid dream, and that will alert you when it happens. You'll immediately wake up and go, oh my God, I can't believe I can do this. I'm really dreaming. If you get into the habit of actually doing that, it will carry over into the dream, and then you'll find that you'll do that, and that will awaken probably an area of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, and you'll then have access to oh my God, I'm asleep, my body's lying in bed somewhere, and I here I am in this other world. This is amazing. Another technique that I use for testing my reality is to look at a piece of paper or magazine or book or something with a written text on it, and memorizing a few words from it, looking away, and then looking back. In a dream, you'll find that the words will change almost every time. They won't be the same words. And you will be astonished if you get into the habit of doing this. If you start doing it every day, at least like an hour a day, am I dreaming right now? And testing, looking at something written, looking away, looking back, or trying to breathe through your nostrils. If you really get into the habit of doing this about, an hour, once every hour, every day for day after day, it will eventually start to happen in your dreams. And you will wake up in your dreams. And you'll suddenly go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually dreaming right now. And you'll look around the room, and you will be just amazed at how real everything looks, how solid everything looks. And the most important thing then is to not get too excited, because most people will, oh my God, I'm dreaming, wow! And then they actually, so much adrenaline, so much excitatory neurotransmitters, and so much stimulation that they actually physically wake up in their bed, and the lucid dream only lasts a few seconds. So you have to learn to stay calm. You have to learn to really keep your emotions at a more neutral level, and then you have the opportunity to start exploring the dream state. I mean, some of the wonderful things to try at first are to you can try to move your hand through solid objects. You can try to elongate parts of your body. You can try to fly. You can try to materialize things out of thin air. You can try. It's very, very difficult to do that at first because you usually need some type of prop. So the way to do it is by, thinking about what you would like to materialize, inside of a box or inside of a drawer, and then opening it up and saying it aloud, and then you'll often find it there. There's many, many different tricks I describe, dozens of different things you can do in your lucid dreams. Probably the most interesting then is speaking to the dream itself, like I described earlier. But most important thing is just, reading about lucid dreaming, thinking about it, keeping a dream journal and getting into the habit of asking yourself, am I dreaming right now? And I think that everyone with time will eventually be having lucid dreams.
How long did it take you to start having them consistently?
Well, it happened to me spontaneously when I was a teenager. It happened to me when I was around 16 years old. It happened around 2 days after I had a experience tripping on LSD, and that's why I think there's such a strong connection between psychedelics and lucid dreaming. But they happened to me sporadically during my teenage years. Maybe a couple maybe a couple every year if I remember right, or maybe every couple months I think it would happen. But when I was in my early 20s, I met Stephen LaBerge, the Stanford researcher, when I was doing the interviews for my book Mavericks of the Mind, and I learned about his research, and I learned about the techniques that some of which I described earlier, and that's when I started practicing them. And then when I started practicing those techniques, I was able to then start having several lucid dreams a month on average. I was having like at least one a week when I was practicing that regularly. And this is the thing about lucid dreaming. Recently I've had quite a few lucid dreams too. But they sort of come and go. Different periods in your life, you'll have them more than others. And the techniques that I described in the training, it's more like athletic training than it is like learning how to ride a bicycle. In other words, you have to kind of keep doing it for it to keep working. If you stop doing the techniques and stop doing the practices, you'll stop having lucid dreams, and you'll become like an amnesic, drunk again every night in terms of remembering what happened, to your nighttime experiences. So there's a real importance to practicing these techniques regularly, and that's the way you'll have them regularly. And if you keep practicing them, you can have them throughout your life, and you'll develop greater abilities within the dreams. You'll learn more and more what you can do and what you can't do, and how to stay in the lucid dream longer, how to sustain it longer, and how to change things. And there's really it's literally a whole new world of possibility. And I welcome to hear from your listeners experiences about lucid dreams and what they've experienced, and if anybody's shared any shared lucid dreams especially, I'd be most interested in hearing about that, because I may be using this in a future book. So
fascinating.
I'm curious to hear about that from our listeners as well. I know that I know that we're getting low on time with you, though, David. So why don't you tell people, where they can find the new book, a little bit about the new book, maybe your previous books, and where they can contact you, find out more about you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I was going to mention earlier that when you mentioned my interview books, there was actually a fifth interview book that was just published by Inner Traditions called, what is it called? Psychedelic Frontiers, Explorations of Psychedelic Frontiers. And that has interviews with all the psychedelic researchers, Stanislav Grof, Dennis McKenna, and Simon Posford from Spangel, and many other people in the psychedelic, Roland Griffiths from Johns Hopkins in the psychedelic community. And my newest book, Dreaming Wide Awake, is just published by Inner Traditions, and it's available on Amazon and many fine bookstores near you. So, and to contact me and stay in touch with me is, the best way is probably really through my Facebook page. I have a public Facebook page, and anyone is welcome to friend me and stay in touch that way. And my website is www.mavericksofthemind.com.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Well, this has been an incredible show, as always. Our guest tonight has been David J. Brown. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it has been such a pleasure. Eric and Patrick, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your wonderful questions.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Eric Scott Picard, co-host this evening, as always, Patrick Ryan. This has been Free Radical Media Podcast, and if you have enjoyed this and our other shows, please consider contributing to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/freeradicalmedia. You can sponsor us there and keep the show running and allow us to expand into even further avenues. You can contact us via most of your social media platforms, particularly Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. So, for David J. Brown, Patrick Ryan, I'm Eric Scott Picard. Thank you for joining us on the Free Radical Media Podcast. Good night.